The room was full of applause, but she wasn't impressed. A Grammy-winning star known for her voice and her attitude, arrogant, untouchable. The kind of artist who didn't just perform, she dominated. And tonight, she was bored. She scanned the room, past producers, past celebrities, until her eyes landed on him. A quiet man in the corner. No spotlight, no attention. Just sitting there like he didn't belong. Perfect. She smiled. "Let's have some fun," she said, loud enough for people to hear. She walked over, heels clicking, confidence cutting through the room. "You," she said, pointing at him, "come on stage with me." Laughter rippled. People leaned in. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup. "Let's see if you can sing," she added, smirking. The man stood slowly. No protest, no nerves, just calm. He took the microphone, and for a split second, someone in the crowd froze. Because the man she had just picked to humiliate wasn't a nobody. He was Elvis Presley. And the next note he sang would flip the entire room upside down. The year was 1969. Nashville's Ryman Auditorium, the mother church of country music, was hosting an industry showcase. Record executives, session musicians, rising stars, all packed into the historic venue for an evening of performances and networking. The air smelled like bourbon and ambition. She was the headliner that night. We'll call her Victoria Lane, though that wasn't her real name. Victoria had just won her first Grammy for Best Female Vocal Performance. At 28, she'd climbed from singing back up to commanding stages across America. Talent? Undeniable. But success had sharpened her edges into something cutting. Earlier that evening, she'd dismissed 3 different musicians who'd approached her. Too eager, too ordinary. She'd publicly corrected a sound engineer during sound check, making him restart her levels 4 times while the room watched. When another female singer complimented her dress, Victoria had looked her up and down and said, "Thanks, I had it custom made. You probably couldn't afford the designer." This was her kingdom. Everyone here either wanted something from her or feared her judgment. Elvis wasn't supposed to be there at all. He'd come to Nashville quietly, driving himself in a rental car, no entourage, no press announcement. He was between film projects and Vegas commitments, feeling creatively restless. The movie roles had become predictable. The songs they gave him felt manufactured. He wanted to reconnect with something real, something that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Someone had mentioned this industry showcase to him. Low-key, they'd said, just musicians appreciating music. So he'd shown up in simple slacks and a dark jacket, slipping in through a side entrance, taking a seat in the back corner where the stage lights didn't reach. Most people didn't recognize him. The king of rock and roll, hiding in plain sight. He'd been enjoying the anonymity, actually. Watching younger artists perform, hearing the hunger in their voices. It reminded him of Sun Studio, of those early days when everything felt possible and nothing felt calculated. Then Victoria took the stage. Her voice was exceptional. He'd give her that. Powerful, controlled, with a range that could shift from whisper to wail without warning. She performed 3 songs, each one showcasing a different facet of her ability. The crowd responded enthusiastically. They should have. She was good. But between songs, Elvis noticed something else. The way she spoke to the audience carried an edge. self-deprecating humor that actually depreciated everyone around her. Little comments about other performers, about the venue, about Nashville itself. Always delivered with a smile, always getting laughs, but always with teeth. After her third song, she paused, scanning the crowd with theatrical precision. "You know what I love about these industry events?" she said into the microphone. "Everyone here is so serious, so professional." She drew out the word mockingly. "Where's the spontaneity? Where's the danger?" A few nervous chuckles. "I think we need to shake things up." Her eyes continued moving across the room. "Let's bring someone up here. Someone unexpected. Someone who looks like they've never been on stage in their entire life." That's when her gaze landed on the quiet man in the corner. Elvis saw it happening, watched her eyes lock onto him, watched the calculation behind her smile. He'd seen this before, this particular brand of cruelty disguised as entertainment, the impulse to elevate yourself by diminishing someone else. "You," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the now silent room. "Yes, you in the back, the shy one trying to disappear into the shadows." Heads turned. Elvis felt the collective attention shift in his direction. "Come on up here," she continued, gesturing with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Don't be scared. I promise I won't bite." Pause for effect. Much. More laughter now, louder. The audience was in on the joke. They understood the game. Watch the Grammy winner have some fun with a random nobody. Elvis remained seated, his expression unreadable. "Oh, he's playing hard to get," Victoria announced. "I like that. Makes it more interesting." She stepped down from the stage, microphone still in hand, and began walking toward him. The crowd parted. Someone near Elvis whispered urgently, "That's—" But Victoria was already there, standing directly in front of him, close enough that the microphone would pick up anything he said. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Elvis looked up at her. His face remained calm, almost pleasant. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, polite. "Just visiting," he said. "Just visiting," she repeated into the microphone. "How mysterious. Well, just visiting. I think you should come sing with me." "What do you say?" The room held its breath. This was the moment. Either he'd refuse and look cowardly, or he'd accept and get humiliated. Either way, Victoria won. Elvis stood slowly, unfolding to his full height. He was taller than she'd expected. Something about the way he moved, unhurried and deliberate, should have registered as unusual. But Victoria was too focused on her performance to notice. She handed him the microphone with exaggerated ceremony, turning to the audience with a conspiratorial grin that said, "Watch this." "Can you sing?" she asked him, loud enough for everyone to hear. Elvis looked at the microphone in his hand, then at her, then at the expectant faces filling the Ryman, and smiled. "Can you sing?" The question hung there, wrapped in mockery, designed to expose weakness. Elvis turned the microphone over in his hand once, twice, like he was weighing something far heavier than the metal casing. "A little," he said. Victoria's grin widened. The audience leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. This was going exactly as planned. "Wonderful," she purred. "What should we sing together? Something simple, maybe. Don't want to embarrass you too badly on your first time." She was already turning in towards the stage, expecting him to follow like a puppy. But Elvis didn't move. I'll sing alone if that's all right. Victoria stopped. Her smile flickered for just a second before reconstructing itself. Oh, you want a solo? How brave! She faced the crowd, eyebrows raised in exaggerated surprise. Our mystery man wants the stage all to himself. Scattered applause, nervous energy building. By all means, she said, gesturing grandly toward the stage. Show us what you got. Elvis walked forward, not rushed, not hesitant, just walking. The crowd parted automatically, though most didn't know why. Something about his movement commanded space without demanding it. He climbed the 3 wooden steps to the Ryman stage, the same boards where Hank Williams had stood, where Patsy Cline had sung, where gospel and country had merged into something the world called Nashville. Victoria remained at floor level, arms crossed, microphone ready to deliver commentary. She'd done this before. Pick someone from the audience, let them fail publicly, swoop in with perfectly timed joke that makes everyone forget the cruelty and remember only the laughter. Elvis reached center stage and stopped. He looked out at the room, really looked, like he was seeing past the suits and jewelry into something older and truer. Then he closed his eyes and sang. The first note hit like a physical thing, not loud, not showy, just pure. It was a gospel song, old as Mississippi dirt, the kind his mother used to sing while hanging laundry in the Tupelo heat. His voice filled the Ryman the way water fills a glass, completely, inevitably. No microphone tricks, no amplification games, just a human voice reaching the back row, the balcony, the rafters where pigeons nested between shows. Victoria's smile died. The first person to recognize him was sitting 5 rows back. A session musician who'd worked on some of Elvis's recordings in the early 70s. His face went white. He grabbed his wife's arm, pointed, mouthed words she couldn't hear over the singing. Then someone else knew. And another. Recognition spread through the room like a slow-burning fuse, row by row, face by face, the collective realization that they weren't watching a nobody get humiliated. They were watching Elvis Presley sing gospel in the mother church of country music, unplugged, unannounced, uninvited. The song built. His voice climbed higher, found notes that shouldn't exist in a human throat, held them until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Victoria stood frozen at the base of the stage. Her microphone hung limp in her hand. The smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by something between shock and horror. Because she was watching her joke turn into a masterclass. Elvis's eyes stayed closed. He wasn't performing anymore. This was something else. Prayer, maybe. Confession. The kind of singing that happens when nobody's watching, even though hundreds were. The room had gone completely silent except for his voice. No coughing, no shifting, no whispered conversations, just listening. Real listening. The kind that happens maybe twice in a person's life if they're lucky. A woman in the 3rd row started crying. Then a man near the sound booth. Not sad tears, the other kind. The ones that come when something breaks open inside you that's been sealed shut too long. The song reached its peak. Elvis's voice soared, cracked, recovered, soared again, raw and perfect simultaneously. Then he brought it down, gentle, like putting a baby to sleep. The final note hung in the air for 3 seconds. 4, 5, silence, complete absolute silence. Elvis opened his eyes. He looked directly at Victoria, still standing below the stage with her dead microphone and dead smile. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The applause started slow. One person, two. Then it hit like a wave, crashing through the Ryman with the force of recognition, shame, and awe all mixed together. People stood. Not a polite standing ovation, a compulsory one. The kind where staying seated feels physically impossible. Victoria finally moved. She climbed the stage steps, her confidence shattered, but her survival instinct intact. She raised her microphone, clearly planning to say something, to reclaim control of the moment, to spin this somehow. Elvis handed his microphone to the stage manager and walked toward the steps. "Wait," Victoria called after him, her voice carrying that forced brightness again. "At least tell us who you—" But he was already gone. Down the steps, through the parted crowd, toward the exit. Someone tried to follow him, then several people. But by the time they reached the back door, the alley was empty. Just streetlights and the distant sound of Broadway honky-tonks bleeding into the November night. Inside the Ryman, chaos erupted. Everyone talking at once, comparing notes, confirming what they'd seen, trying to make sense of the impossible. Victoria stood alone on stage, her Grammy suddenly feeling very light, her confidence suddenly feeling very earned, and her joke suddenly feeling very expensive. Because in less than 4 minutes, a quiet man in the corner had reminded an entire room what real power sounds like, and it sounds nothing like arrogance. The news spread like fire through dry timber. Within an hour, every honky-tonk on Broadway knew. By midnight, the phone lines at WSM Radio were jammed. By sunrise, the story had crossed state lines. Elvis Presley had walked into the Ryman Auditorium unannounced and destroyed a Grammy winner with nothing but his voice and silence. But here's what nobody knew yet. What happened inside that building after Elvis left? Victoria stood on stage for maybe 30 seconds after he disappeared, long enough for the applause to fade, long enough for the room to remember she existed. She tried to laugh it off, raised her microphone, started to say something about unexpected surprises. Nobody was listening. The crowd had already fractured into a dozen conversations, people grabbing strangers by the arm, asking, "Did you see that?" Telling anyone who'd listen that they'd just witnessed something unrepeatable. Victoria's words dissolved into the noise like sugar in hot coffee. She walked off stage without finishing her sentence. Her manager found her in the green room 10 minutes later, sitting in front of a mirror, staring at her reflection like she was meeting herself for the first time. "That was Elvis Presley," he said. Not a question, a sentencing. She didn't respond. "Do you understand what you just did?" Still nothing. "You humiliated Elvis Presley on stage, in the Ryman, in front of half of Music Row." He was pacing now, his voice climbing. "Every radio station in the South is going to run this story by morning. Every newspaper. You called out the king of rock and roll like he was some drunk tourist." Victoria finally spoke. Her voice came out flat, empty. "I didn't know. That's not going to matter." He was right. By Monday morning, the story had metastasized beyond control. But here's where it gets strange. The narrative didn't go the way her manager predicted. The headlines weren't cruel. They were curious. Elvis stuns Nashville in secret Ryman appearance. The night the king returned to gospel roots. Presley reminds Music City what real singing sounds like. Nobody mentioned Victoria by name. Not in the major papers, not on the radio. It was like she'd been erased from her own story, reduced to a footnote, a nameless setup for Elvis's unexpected return, which somehow felt worse than being attacked. 3 days after the incident, her phone rang at 2 in the morning. She almost didn't answer. When she did, the voice on the other end was quiet, familiar in a way that made her stomach drop. "Miss Victoria, this is Sam Phillips, Sun Records." She sat up in bed. "I was at the Ryman on Saturday night. Saw the whole thing." He paused. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened." Her throat went tight. "I didn't mean, I know you didn't. That's why I'm calling." The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Phillips didn't lecture her, didn't judge. He told her a story instead, about a young Elvis, 19 years old, walking into his studio in Memphis with nothing but hunger and a voice he didn't quite know how to control yet. About how Elvis had been dismissed, mocked, told he sounded too black for white radio and too white for black radio. "You know what kept him going?" Phillips asked. Victoria didn't answer. He never forgot what the music was for. Not fame, not proving people wrong. The music itself. That's what he served on that stage Saturday night. Not his ego. Just the song. The line went quiet for a moment. "You've got a gift," Philip continued. "A real one. But gifts don't protect themselves. You have to decide what you're serving. The spotlight or the song." He hung up before she could respond. Victoria didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat in her living room replaying the Ryman in her mind, but from a different angle now. Not what Elvis did to her, what he showed her. She'd spent 5 years building a career on control, perfect pitch, perfect timing, perfect image. She'd turned singing into a weapon, something to win with, to dominate spaces and silence doubters. And it had worked. The Grammys proved it. But standing on that stage watching Elvis sing, she'd felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood. Before the lessons and the showcases and the industry machinery, she'd felt small, not diminished, just right-sized, reminded that music was bigger than any single person's ambition. The following Sunday, Victoria did something nobody expected. She showed up at a small church in East Nashville. Not her church, not a publicity stunt. Just a wooden building with 40 people in the pews and a piano that needed tuning. She asked if she could sing. The pastor, confused but gracious, said yes. She sang the same hymn Elvis had sung at the Ryman, same arrangement, same key. But this time she wasn't performing, wasn't proving. She closed her eyes and let the song move through her instead of bending it to her will. Her voice cracked twice. She didn't correct it. When she finished, the small congregation sat in silence. Then an older woman in the front row stood and hugged her. Didn't say anything, just held her while Victoria cried into her shoulder, releasing something she didn't have words for. That moment didn't make headlines. Nobody wrote about it, no cameras captured it, but for Victoria it mattered more than the Grammy ever had, because she finally understood what Elvis knew all along. The power wasn't in commanding the room. It was in serving something greater than yourself. And sometimes the greatest performances happen when nobody's keeping score. The church visit changed something fundamental in Victoria's approach to music. But the industry doesn't pause for personal revelations. 3 days after her quiet Sunday morning performance, her manager called with news that made her stomach drop. "You've been invited to perform at the Kennedy Center Honors," Sarah said. "It's Elvis. They're honoring his legacy." Victoria's hand tightened around her phone. "When?" "6 weeks. They want you to sing during the tribute segment." Of course they did. The Ryman incident had gone viral, despite neither artist acknowledging it publicly. Bootleg recordings circulated online. Think pieces analyzed the moment from every angle. The narrative had crystallized. Young star humbled by legend, ego versus artistry, the changing of the guard that never happened. The Kennedy Center wanted that story on their stage. "I can't," Victoria said. Sarah's silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. "You're joking." "I'm not ready." "Ready? Victoria, this is the Kennedy Center. This is—" "I know what it is." She stared out her apartment window at Nashville's skyline. "That's why I can't fake it." She hung up before Sarah could argue further. The truth was more complicated than not being ready. Victoria had spent the past 3 days at that small church, sitting in empty pews, trying to understand what Elvis had tapped into that night at the Ryman. Something beyond technique or emotion or even faith. Something she'd lost somewhere between childhood and the Grammys. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the Kennedy Center. You should do it." No signature, but she knew. Somehow Elvis had gotten her number, or someone in his circle had. She typed back, "How did you know I turned it down?" Nashville's a small town, even when it's big. Another message followed immediately. "You're overthinking it." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, "What if I can't do it justice?" The response took longer this time. She watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice before his message came through. "Nobody can. That's not the point. The point is showing up anyway." She read it 3 times. Then she called Sarah back. The 6 weeks dissolved faster than seemed possible. Victoria worked differently this time. No vocal coach, no arrangement meetings. She spent hours in that East Nashville church, learning the hymns Elvis had grown up singing. The pastor, Reverend Miles, was in his 70s and remembered when gospel was the only music that mattered in these neighborhoods. "Your voice is trained," he told her one afternoon. "That's good. But you're trying to control things that don't want to be controlled." "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the piano. "Play something. Anything." Victoria sat down and began a song she'd performed 100 times. Technically perfect, emotionally calibrated, safe. Reverend Miles shook his head. "Now play something that scares you." She stopped. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do. You've been scared since you walked in here 3 weeks ago. Scared you can't measure up. Scared you'll fail. Scared people will see through you." He leaned forward. "Play from that place." Victoria's hands found the keys again. This time she chose a song she'd written years ago and never performed. Too raw, too personal, too revealing. Her voice cracked on the second verse. She kept going. By the bridge, tears were streaming down her face. She didn't stop. When she finished, the silence felt different than the Ryman's weighted judgment. This was acceptance. "That," Reverend Miles said quietly, "is what people need to hear." The Kennedy Center rose into the December night like a monument to American culture. Victoria stood backstage in a simple black dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back. The opposite of her usual performance armor. She could hear the orchestra warming up, could feel the weight of the evening settling over everything. This wasn't just another award show. This was history being honored, and she was about to step into the center of it. A stagehand appeared. 5 minutes, Miss Chen. She nodded, unable to speak. Someone touched her shoulder. She turned to find Elvis standing there, wearing a dark suit that made him look both timeless and somehow out of place in the modern venue. "You're here," she said stupidly. "It's my tribute. Had to show up." A slight smile. "You ready?" "No." "Good. You will be." He started to walk away, then stopped. "Victoria? That thing you're afraid of? The reason you almost didn't come?" She waited. "It's the same thing that'll make this matter. Don't run from it. Sing straight into it." The stage manager called her name. Elvis disappeared into the wings. Victoria walked onto the Kennedy Center stage to thunderous applause. The audience was filled with legends, politicians, artists who'd shaped American culture. She found her mark at the microphone, and the applause faded. The conductor raised his baton. In that breath before the music started, Victoria made a choice, not to be perfect, not to prove anything, just to honor something bigger than herself. She opened her mouth and let the song carry her instead of carrying it. Her voice filled the hall, raw and human and achingly honest. She didn't hit every note perfectly, didn't care. She sang like Reverend Miles taught her, from the scared place, the uncertain place, the place where technique surrendered to truth. Somewhere in the third verse, she glanced toward the wings and saw Elvis watching. He wasn't smiling, wasn't nodding approval. He was crying, and she understood finally what he'd been trying to show her all along. The performance ended to a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Kennedy Center. Victoria stood at the microphone, chest heaving, tears still wet on her face. She'd never felt more exposed or more complete. Backstage, the reality of what she'd done hit her. She'd cried in front of America's cultural elite. She'd let her voice crack. She'd abandoned everything that made her safe. That was extraordinary, a voice behind her. She turned to find Quincy Jones, a man who'd shaped the sound of generations. "I've heard you sing 100 times. I've never heard you before tonight." Before she could respond, others surrounded her, not with the usual industry congratulations, but with something different. Recognition. These weren't just compliments. They were acknowledgments that she'd crossed into territory most artists never reach. Elvis found her an hour later in a quiet hallway away from the reception. She was sitting on the floor, still in her dress, shoes kicked off. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know what I am." She looked up at him. "Everything I built my career on, I just threw it away." "No." He sat down beside her, ignoring the expensive suit. "You threw away the armor. The career's still there. Just real now." "I'm terrified." "Good. Means you did it right." He was quiet for a moment. "You know why I wanted you for this tribute?" She shook her head. "Because you reminded me of myself. Not the good parts, the scared parts. The parts that build walls so high nobody can see you bleeding behind them." He smiled slightly. "Takes one to know one." "So this was therapy?" "This was a mirror. I showed you what you were doing. You're the one who decided to stop." A stagehand appeared around the corner. "Mr. Presley? They're ready for your remarks." Elvis stood, brushed off his pants. "Come on. You should be there for this." The reception hall had been transformed. A simple stage, a microphone, chairs arranged in intimate rows. This wasn't the main tribute. This was something else. Elvis took the stage to warm applause. He looked different now. Older, yes, but also more present, more here. "I've been thinking about legacy," he began. "What we leave behind. Not the records or the awards, but the truth we tell." He paused. "I spent a lot of years running from truth, hiding behind performances, building a version of myself that couldn't be touched because it wasn't real enough to hurt." The room was silent. People leaned forward. "Someone asked me once why I kept singing gospel when it didn't make money. Why I'd stop concerts to talk to people instead of just performing. Why I'd risk looking foolish or weak." He smiled. "Because the only thing worth doing is the thing that scares you into being honest." Victoria watched from the side. This wasn't a speech. It was a confession. "The young woman who sang tonight, she gets it now. Took her a while." He glanced toward Victoria. "Took me longer. But here's what I learned. The moment you stop trying to control how people see you is the moment you finally become visible." He stepped away from the microphone, then back. "One more thing. People think legacy is about being remembered. It's not. It's about what you make possible for whoever comes next. If my music helped somebody sing their truth, then I did something that mattered." The applause was different this time. Quieter. Deeper. Later, much later, Victoria found herself back at the piano in Belmont's practice room, the same place where this had started. But everything was different now. She played the song she'd performed at the Kennedy Center. Not trying to recapture the moment, just exploring it, understanding it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her manager. "Offers pouring in. Everyone wants the new you." She smiled and put the phone away. They didn't want the new her. They wanted to package what happened tonight. Turn vulnerability into product. But that wasn't the lesson. The lesson was simpler and harder. Stop performing yourself. Start being yourself. Reverend Miles appeared in the doorway. "Heard you did good." "I did different." "Same thing." He sat down. "You coming back to practice?" "Every Tuesday, if you'll have me. Church is always open." He stood to leave, then paused. "You know what you did tonight? You gave permission. Somebody watching needed to see that being real is possible." That's the ripple. After he left, Victoria sat at the piano for a long time. She thought about Elvis's words, about legacy and truth, and the things we build to hide behind. She'd spent years constructing the perfect image, the flawless performer, the untouchable star, and in one night, she'd let it all crack open. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was real. Outside, snow had started falling. The practice room windows framed it like a painting. Victoria began to play again, not for an audience, not for approval, just because the music was there and needed to come out. Somewhere in Memphis, Elvis Presley listened to a recording of the tribute on repeat. Not critiquing, just hearing what he'd helped unlock. He thought about all the years he'd spent hiding. All the performances where he'd been perfect and empty. Then he thought about the moments that mattered, the ones where he'd let people see him breaking, where he'd chosen truth over control. Those were the moments people remembered. Those were the moments that changed things. He turned off the recording and picked up his guitar, played a simple melody. Nothing fancy, just honest. That was enough. It had always been enough. He'd just forgotten for a while. Victoria Chen never became less successful after that night. She became different, successful. The kind where people felt something instead of just admiring technique. And every time she stepped on stage, she remembered what Elvis taught her. The only performance worth giving is the one that costs you something. The real story wasn't about Elvis humbling a star. It was about what happens when someone mistakes silence for weakness and discovers they've been testing the wrong person all along. Victoria's career didn't end that night. It transformed. She learned what Elvis had always known. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It just exists, waiting quietly in the corner until someone makes the mistake of challenging it. Years later, she tells students at Berklee College of Music about that night, not as a cautionary tale about humiliation, but as the moment she stopped performing confidence and started earning it. The night she learned that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful one. Elvis never spoke publicly about the incident. He didn't need to. The music had already said everything worth saying. And somewhere in Nashville, in a small church with a piano that still needs tuning, Reverend Miles tells the story to young singers who think volume equals strength. He reminds them that the most devastating performances are the ones delivered in silence, with nothing but truth and a voice that knows exactly what it's worth. That's the lesson Victoria carried forward. That's what made her finally matter. Not the Grammy, not the headlines. The moment she stopped trying to prove she belonged and simply showed up as herself, scared and honest and real.